My name's Tony, and today I'm going to talk about something no one wants to think about. We all dream about what our retirement or our digital nomad life is going to be like, what it's going to mean. Tons of new memories, new adventures, new friends. We all have the same dreams. We just want to be happy. Unfortunately, this video isn't about any of that. This video is about what none of us wants to think about, and that's the ways it can go very wrong and what happens when that all falls apart and turns into a nightmare instead. What should we do if the worst possible thing happens and our loved one passes away while we're so far from home in a place that we probably don't understand that well? And this might sound like something that just shouldn't happen, but it does. Unfortunately, it does. Death is a part of life, and we have almost zero control over it. And it doesn't care whether you are back home in Chicago or you are in Cairo, Egypt. When it happens, it happens. And this video is just about some of the things that you might not have thought about. I know they were things that we had not thought about and things that personally caught me completely off guard. No one wants to talk about the worst case scenario, but I guess having been through it myself, if somebody's going to do it, I kind of felt like it could be me. I have actual firsthand experience, unfortunately. So if passing on what happened to me helps somebody else down the road with the decisions that they may have to make, then this video is worth it. I'm going to try my very best to just keep this pretty much informative, but since this is very personal to me, I apologize in advance if I run on too long. That said, I'm going to just jump right into the basic to-do first type things. And this is a little subjective depending on your circumstances. I wish I could tell you absolutely do 1, 2, 3, but I can't. It's pretty common sense. I've seen a lot of to-do first lists that just have 2 things on there, and they seem to forget a very important step, and that's call your family, call your friends, call your kids, your dog sitter, your minister, your priest, whoever. It doesn't matter. Just call who you need to call. There are circumstances where you should absolutely call the authorities first. In our situation, he had been in the hospital for a little over a week. It was a little different, and they reached out to the local authorities for me. Then all I had to do was wait. It was a long process. I waited for hours for the police to show up to the hospital. And then even once they were there, it was hours more until the hospital released his body for them to take him to the local morgue. Every country's different. Everybody has different procedures, and there's gonna most likely be a lot of language barriers for you. And if you have any kind of local contact that speaks your language and their language, I would highly recommend reaching out. I mean, you can get by using Google Translate, but nothing really beats an actual human being standing there explaining things and going through it with you. I would also advise you to not be surprised if this process means a trip to the police station. They are going to have to file an official report, even in my circumstance with a death in a hospital where he had been for over a week. They had to file an official report, and they wanted it done now. The death of a foreign citizen is a complicated matter, and they want to get it completed and started on right away. And even though it was 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, when I got to the police station, it didn't matter. I wasn't allowed to leave until the report was done. You're in for a long day. After getting a hold of your family and getting a hold of the local authorities, because I don't care what order you do those in, I actually would do both of those before I do this next one, because this next one is kind of, it's hit and miss. It's very, very necessary. So it's absolutely crucial that you do it, but they are very limited in what they can do for you. I think I always felt like reaching out to your embassy was kind of like the miracle thing that was going to make so much happen. It's just really not the case. There just isn't a lot that they can do. They don't offer legal advice. They don't offer any kind of assistance with funerals or arrangements or anything like that. All they really do is provide you with resources. They are critical, though. They are going to give you documents eventually that you are going to need. The call to the embassy is one of the most important calls that you're going to make. This is when you're going to find out what your options are, which is what really brings me to the point of why I'm making this video. That's what caught me off guard, that I didn't expect and that we hadn't looked into in advance. Typically, often, going to have three options, and that's local burial, local cremation, or repatriation back to the United States or wherever you come from. I'm a U.S. citizen, so I generally am going to talk in that you're dealing with America, but this is going to go for every foreign citizen living in or staying in or even visiting any foreign country, really. I mean, this isn't just for retirees and digital nomads. If you're on your week vacation and this happens, this is things that you need to know. It's really for pretty much anybody out there that travels. The key word in that sentence that I used was often, because it's not always the case. And that's what I found out the hard way. I think especially as Americans, we tend to just assume that everything we are used to is going to be readily available. Years ago, my husband and I had the hard discussion, and we had both decided that we wanted to be cremated. It was mostly for financial reasons. Traditional funerals in America have gotten to just be so expensive that it just didn't seem rational to either of us to spend that kind of money. Cremation just seemed like it made the most sense, and we just kind of assumed that that was that. We both agreed, and end of story. Well, the phone call to the embassy is when I made the discovery that cremation was not going to be a possibility. I was shocked. It was something that was just not even on our radar to even think about. It wasn't something that we looked at when we traveled. You don't Google what do they do when you die in a foreign country. I mean, it's just not the normal, which, that's good. I mean, we shouldn't dwell on the worst case scenario, but we should have some general concept of that things might not work like we think they're going to. There was one possible way to do a cremation from the country that I'm in, but it would have meant transporting his remains to another country, and that country is not really on the best terms with the United States right now. So when I contacted the embassy about doing this, well, let's just say they obviously strongly discouraged it. I did actually consider going ahead with it anyways, but something that the embassy said, it was the prospect of not being able to get his ashes back. And that's what finally ruled it out for me. Left me with two choices, and that was local burial or repatriation. I know that there are a lot of retirees and digital nomads out there doing the exact same thing we were. We had traveled to somewhere that medical costs are so low that we were just paying out of pocket for anything that we needed. That meant no international health coverage or travel insurance, which also meant no coverage for the cost of repatriation. Not only is it a very expensive process, it runs on average between 10 and 20,000 US dollars to pay for. Also, very complex. It's awful to have to take the costs into considerations at times like this, but we didn't own a home. We had gotten rid of everything to do this travel forever type retirement thing. So it just didn't make sense. I will say, if you are out there right now and you're still planning your retirement, or you're looking at digital nomad life and all of that, and you're still on the fence about whether you're going to get international health insurance, maybe let this be your deciding factor, especially if, like, there's no way that your family is going to be happy, or that you're going to be happy, or your loved one's going to be happy if you do not get to go back home for burial or whatever. For those of you out there that already have international health insurance or maybe travel insurance, you need to actually make sure that it's covered, because they do not all cover it. Do not assume that you're covered. Some of them offer it only as like an add-on for an additional fee. Anyhow, back to the embassy. They're going to provide you with a very important document, which is called a CRODA, or Consular Report of Death Abroad. I guess it represents a U.S. Death certificate. It's very important. You're going to need it to deal with insurance. You're going to need it to deal with the bank accounts. You're going to need it to deal with the credit cards. The digital copy was sufficient for everything that I needed, and that included dealing with taking his name off of our bank account, dealing with his 401k, dealing with all of his credit cards. I didn't need a physical copy and didn't have to send one to anywhere. To get this document, the embassy is going to need you to actually go to the embassy, because you are going to have to bring them the notarized certificate. The people from the funeral home and the cemetery are going to give you the documents that you need. Just know that you need a translated, notarized, or apostilled copy. They are also going to require you to bring the passport of your spouse or significant other down there. Don't worry, you're going to get it back. All they did was punch it just like an expired passport would have. No difference. Anyhow, in the end, I opted for local burial. Local burial does not necessarily mean that you have to have your loved one buried in the town they passed away in. My husband passed away while we were traveling in a completely different part of the country, like 5 hours by train away from where we had been regularly staying. So this meant deciding whether to have him buried there or transport him back to where we had been. I actually chose to do the former for 2 reasons, and I'm just telling you all this so that you think about things. After everything that had happened and stuff, him getting sick, and he was in the hospital for over a week, and I just didn't have good memories there. And I didn't really ever want to have to go back. So that was a big reason. And then my second reason was more just logical. You have to think logically sometimes, and whether we like it or not. We had been staying in the capital city before we had went there, and I knew going back to the capital was going to make things easier down the road for whenever I wanted to come back, for if family ever wanted to come. Plus, we were happy here. He wasn't sick when we were here. We did everything that we wanted to. We enjoyed the sights and had a good Christmas, and there was nothing but happy memories here. So it just seemed like the best choice. I'm going to try to give you a quick breakdown of how local burial went. The first thing I had to do, of course, was I had to find somebody to transport his remains. The company I had first contacted about doing the cross-border cremation that I ended up choosing not to do was actually able to handle everything. All I had to do was meet them at the local morgue to go claim his body for them to be able to transport him. The local police gave me the form that I needed for the release of his body. They gave that to me the night that they filed the initial report. Just be aware that whatever order it happens in, you are going to need this form. From there, I had 2 options. I could have traveled back with him. They would have taken me by car, or I could do it on my own. And I actually chose to do the latter just because I needed to deal with other things also. Like what I was going to do with a whole extra set of luggage and personal effects. It is just, I'm telling you, it is just truly an unimaginable thing to have to deal with all of this alone in a foreign country. But there was just no way that I could manage everything we had, not logistically. And we had packed pretty light for two people leaving our home country to forever travel. We left the US each with one carry-on size suitcase, one laptop bag, and in addition to that, we had one, but it was kind of a medium large suitcase, and that was to share. That's not a lot, not for two people, but it was more than I could handle now by myself. Can't finagle it all. Not knowing where to take things, honestly, I reached out to the owner of the Airbnb we were in and asked him if he could help me. I didn't know anybody else. I proceeded to consolidate everything of his that he had brought with us down to just his carry-on bag. I kept a few of his shirts for keepsakes. I kept some odds and end type things that just reminded me of him, and a few things, silly things we picked up along the trip. And I kept all of his electronic stuff, his laptop and his phone and the camera and all of that kind of stuff. That could probably be a whole nother video in itself because those electronics need to be dealt with. And it took me days to deal with all those electronics, as far as wiping all of his files, transferring all of his files to my laptop. If you guys are out there and you're doing YouTube videos or you've been around computers, you know you just can't get rid of them. There's just a lot that you have to do with electronics nowadays to make it safe to get rid of them. Everything else went into the big suitcase. And the big suitcase, the Airbnb owner arranged to come pick it up, and he brought it to his local church for me to donate. It was definitely not an easy thing to have to do, especially with how fast things had to happen. I felt better knowing that hopefully a few things would help somebody else. This stuff all happens really fast, and you got to make decisions really quick, and that's another reason why I wanted to make this video, just because you need to know in advance. You need to look at things. We all need to take the time to just think about what if. I mean, God forbid it happens, but you know what? It does. It happens. Well, it may not be common. There are many of us out there that have had to struggle through this, and it's better to think about it beforehand and be at least even a little bit prepared than to be completely caught off guard. I don't know. I think in America too, I always figured also that I had more time to decide things. And I think that actually is the case, and not to be too blunt or get into too much details, but we have better facilities. But that's not the case in all countries. They just don't have the facility for it. Things have to happen fast because they're not equipped to be able to deal with any alternative. I think here where I am, the law is actually 7 to 10 days, I believe, but every country's different, so you'd have to look that up depending on where you are. As far as how fast the body has to be actually buried. In my case, my husband passed away on April 14th. On April 17th, I was headed back on the train, and on the 19th, he was buried. That was Easter week, and Easter's a very big deal here, so it kind of needed to happen in advance of Easter Sunday, and the 19th was that Saturday. So just another example of the things that you don't have any control over that may actually maybe push the schedule and make it either have to be faster or maybe slower, depending on if they have better facilities or whatever. It all happened too fast. You don't get weeks to make all these huge decisions. I don't even know if you get days. You get hours. You also really need to inform yourself about like local customs with some of this. Here, burial, the actual burial, that was just a start. I still had to deal with making the arrangements for his burial plot to be finished, just like back home. You'd be buried and then you'd arrange for a headstone. But that isn't what happens here. Once again, I was caught off guard about what this was going to mean. A burial plot here has an enclosure wall around it that runs around each plot and separates each plot from the next plot. And then inside that is where you would put like your headstone. The usual here is a wall mounted granite stone with the name and dates and a photo of your loved one on it. I will say it is quite lovely once it's done. I struggled at first with the idea of the photo on it because it's just not something we do. And it's just a black and white photo. It's very traditional and classic looking, but we just don't typically do that in America. So at first I wasn't going to do it. And then I remembered a recent photo that we had took because we hardly ever take pictures while we're traveling or anything. But I remembered a photo that we took within the past few months and decided to go ahead and do that. And like I said, it did, I think, turn out quite nice. It's a process. It's a long process. The site has to be prepped. Then the base concrete wall enclosure has to be set. And then after that, the walls get finished. You've got different choices of how they get finished. And then in addition to that, they have like a capstone on the walls, and you have your choice on what kind of granite gets used for those capstones. Then finally you have to make the decision about what you're going to do as far as the headstone itself. From the time he was buried back in April, it took 4 months for his burial plot to finally be finished. That's a very long time. I had plenty of time left on my visa, so I didn't have to worry about doing any kind of visa run or anything like that during it. That is the quickest, briefest that I could do. Sorry if I went on too long of everything that I went through with doing the local burial. If you have any questions on it, you can drop a comment. I think I explained things pretty in detail, probably too much in detail. I kind of had to write this out. This was a really hard video to make. It was a really hard thing to personally go through. It's really hard to put the information together in any kind of way that is informative and not too overly emotional so that it's useful to pretty much everybody out there that travels. It was a shock not having the availability of cremation, and I think that people need to be aware that that does exist. Our minds may hear this video and think, well, yeah, duh, of course, there's some countries that don't allow it for religious reasons, but there's a lot of countries out there that don't allow it, or either they do allow it, even still, it's very impractical to the point of impossible. There are major countries that you wouldn't expect, major retiree destinations that you wouldn't expect, especially when it comes to like Southeastern Europe, that even if cremation is legal, they maybe only have one crematorium in the entire country. And that's going to mean transport in some countries that could be not only very complicated, but probably also extremely expensive, even to do that. Take Greece, for example. A lot of retirees go there to the Greek islands. There's one crematorium in the whole of Greece. It's not in Athens. It's like 70 kilometers or something like that away from Athens. That's going to mean transport to that crematorium, and transport isn't cheap. Even where I am in a country that is probably one of the cheapest that are out there, and it still costs several $1,000s just to transport in country. That did not involve anything like in Greece. It may involve having to arrange a boat. Malta is another big retirement destination, tax reasons and things like that. It's another place where cremation is not illegal, but that doesn't do any good if there is not a single crematorium. There are places that it's readily available. It's readily available in America, of course, for foreigners that have travel to America for retirement. It seems to be readily available in pretty much all of Western European countries. It's any Eastern European country that you should probably, at the very least, maybe just look it up in advance so that you know. It's readily available in all of Southeast Asia. Malaysia and Indonesia have some restrictions on cremation. It's not something that they practice, but they allow it for foreign expats. There's 3 or 4 countries in the Middle East that allow it, but once again, it's also for foreign nationals. Otherwise, it's prohibited in their country for religious reasons. Anyways, I think you probably get what I'm saying. From what I looked at, cremation is pretty readily available all throughout South America and Central America. Costa Rica did have some rules also about that an autopsy had to be performed and documentation of that. All of the family agreed that cremation was okay. Even if these countries do technically allow it, it is very rare and may be very regulated. So it's worth looking into in advance. I think that's really about all I have to say on the issue. Video is just to try to get this information out there. I hope no one ever needs this information, but it happens, and we do. We need this information. We need it to be out there, and we need to think about these things whether we like it or not. Whether we're young or we're old, things happen. I'm not going to say I hope you enjoyed the video because I don't think this was that type of video. I hope you maybe found it informative, maybe useful, maybe sad. I don't know, but it's the reality of life, that life doesn't last forever. You're not alone. Even if you're alone when it happens and you're alone in this foreign country, you just know that you're not the first person to go through it. You're not going to be the last. There's resources out there to try to help you, even if you just need somebody to talk to you. I'm not a big social media person, but I did find some comfort just getting on Reddit and joining the widow group on there. None of us have walked in each other's shoes, but we all kind of know what those shoes feel like. It's different scenarios and different circumstances for each one of us, whether it was natural or sudden, or it doesn't really matter. We're all going through the same kind of pain, and it's a comfort to talk to people that understand, and nobody else understands except somebody that's been through it. I personally found it to be at least somewhat of a comfort. If you're religious, connect with your minister, your priest, if that helps you. If you're not religious, maybe connect with nature. The point I guess I'm trying to make is just, reach out. You're not alone. You really aren't. There's so many people out there that are willing to stand by with words of encouragement. You just have to ask. I can't find an appropriate way to sign off this video, so I am just going to say thank you to anybody that watched. I truly hope that you never actually ever have to go through anything like this. And if you're out there and you're watching this and you have been through this, you have my deepest condolences. I'm in your boat. I know where you are. Stay strong and take care of yourselves. Goodbye.